Hello, friends. How are you? It's me, JJ, back for another fabulous Wednesday live stream with all my pals. Today, I thought we would try to mix it up a bit and see if we could come up with things to talk about that were not necessarily just the same old political topics again and again. Not that there's anything wrong with politics, of course. We all love politics. I like politics, but I thought it might be fun to try to branch it up a bit. Thank you for complimenting my hair. My hair is getting pretty nuts. Coronavirus hair. Hey, Modular TV. Thank you so much. I've generally been doing live streams every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So this has sort of been my usual routine now. What is this? This is like live stream number, I have to check my little book. This is live stream number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is live stream number 6. And in most of the previous live streams, we've talked mostly about politics. So I thought it would be fun if we could try to mix it up a bit and maybe talk about some other topics, such as my friend who says, "Do you like Pokemon?" I sure do like Pokemon. And if you follow me on Instagram, you can see that I've been drawing Canadian Pokemon recently. This has been something that is that I've been doing to sort of keep myself sane during the quarantine times. Here, I can show you one of my, see, like, this was one of my Canadian Pokemon I drew. See, it's called Gatinol. Gatinol, get it? Do you like Fire Emblem? I've never played Fire Emblem. But there's too many Fire Emblem characters in Smash Brothers. There's my strong opinion for you. See, look, here's my friend asking me. This is one of like most common questions. So my friend Mario asks me, "What do you know about Brazil?" I am really going to have to make a video about Brazil at some point because there is like nothing that people want me to talk about more than my thoughts, feelings, and knowledge about Brazil in some form or another. But I don't know. I don't know that much about Brazil, to be perfectly honest. It's a country I would like to go to. It's obviously a country with a lot of people, ergo it's an important country. But there's like I know the broad sort of shape of Brazilian history and Brazilian politics, but I don't know that much about Brazilian culture, Brazilian food, sort of daily Brazilian life. It would be an interesting place to learn more about. Here's a good question from my friend Eldoron. What would you say is the most impressive and disappointing thing about internet culture as a whole? I think one of the most, sorry, what was the first part? Like one of the most impressive thing. The most impressive thing about internet culture is, I think, just the ability to unify so many disparate types of people into broad sort of identifiable communities. But I would say that is also probably one of the worst things about internet culture, is that it allows people to niche themselves into smaller and smaller groups, and thus kind of have less and less to do with kind of like sort of broad society and more to just kind of like wallow in your sort of niche interest. I mean, you see this all the time in YouTube. There's so many niche YouTube communities, and there's not a lot of YouTubers that necessarily have a sort of broad appeal. There's nothing wrong with having niche interests, but you have to be able, I think, to engage with sort of the general public and the general culture as well. And I sometimes feel like the internet is something that really works against that in the way that it helps smaller and smaller, more isolated groups. Okay, my friend John and Paul, thank you for the super chat, John. If Quebec is so French, why are you not massively into soccer? Is this sort of saying that, like, if since Quebec is so French, I have to do something super English to kind of annoy them even more? So I should start embracing the most stereotypically English game in the world, which is soccer. Maybe I should start playing cricket instead, or rugby. It's pretty British, right? My friend says, when is the next collab with Mr. Beat? It's a good question. I've done two collabs with Mr. Beat so far, and they've been pretty good. Mr. Beat is a nice guy whose channel you should all check out. Collabs are hard to do. They take a lot of time. You know, you have to coordinate. I have something like 3 or 4 or 5 collabs sort of in the cooker right now. But, you know, getting people to finish their work and getting myself to finish the work and doing the whole collaborative process and then also adhering to your timeline, it's a pretty big challenge. My friend New Jersey Aviation says, have you ever thought about going to Africa? I have thought about going to Africa. I would really like to go to Africa. I would really like to go to South Africa. That is the country I want to visit the most, I think, in the whole world. If I could wave the magic wand and go anywhere tomorrow, it would probably be to South Africa. I think they have a very interesting culture, and I would like to learn more about it, and I would like to see that country up close and get to know some South African people. My friend Foamy Prince says, JJ, what are you doing to help combat boredom during these times? Also, do you think they will weaken the stay-at-home laws in the summer? Because I don't know if I can stay here for 2 months. Yeah, I mean, I hear that. I feel like a lot of people are really sort of getting at their wits' end of the quarantine. Like, I was a real goody-goody in the first week. Like, I was doing absolutely everything I was told to do. I was like very uptight about it. Like, I didn't want to leave my apartment at all for any reason, even to pick up, you know, the parcels from Amazon. I felt like nervous about that. Why can't they just deliver it to the door and this kind of thing? But now it's just kind of like, you know, I'm really sort of phoning it in a lot more. I go out a lot more. You know, I went to the grocery store for the first time the other day and I just didn't feel bad about it at all. I saw my parents. I went to their house and hung out with them a couple of times. You know, oh no, shouldn't hang out with old people, but you know, I kind of did. So I definitely feel like there has to be, at some point, there has to be like a clear sort of deceleration of all of this, because otherwise people are just going to get so sick of the monotony that they're just going to take it into their own hands and they're just going to start breaking the quarantine on their own terms because they feel like it. So I do think the government has to sort of exert itself to kind of hold our hand out of this a little bit. Because if this status quo continues just sort of indefinitely, people are just going to go completely nuts. I mean, you asked me sort of like what I've been doing to sort of stay entertained, and mostly what I've been doing is just honestly working on my videos. You know, I get up, I work on the video all day, and then I go to bed. But I have sort of created some sort of minor entertainments. Like I said, I've been drawing a lot. I've been drawing these Canadian Pokemon, which is, I try to draw one every night, which sort of keeps me entertained. I listen to relaxing music and I draw on my iPad. That's kind of fun. I've been taking to watching The Office. I don't know if you guys are fans of The Office, but it's a show I've always wanted to watch, but never got around to. So I've been making my way through the seasons. Here's a question from The Stick. Being Portuguese myself, it always makes me laugh when I tell people my people's prince gave up running my country to go run Brazil. Yes, that is one of the most sort of fun things about Brazilian history, I think, is this idea of sort of how the Portuguese or how the Brazilian monarchy was established by basically a runaway Portuguese prince who established his own monarchy in the New World. Really weird story. It's the kind of story that I think if you wrote that, like if you wrote a sort of historical fiction story about like a prince of Europe moving to the New World and becoming emperor, people would say, it's a little much, but it actually happened. My friend Jack Rackham, who does these sort of fun historical videos, you know, sort of animation, photographs, sort of South Park kind of style things, they're really cool. And he has a really good video about, what is his name? Pedro the First, the Emperor of Brazil. All right, my friend here, Mallboy MTB says, how many countries in the world have you been to? Okay, so this is a frequently asked JJ question. I have been to, let's see if we can, I think I've been to, actually, hold on. I did a drawing. Let me show you this drawing I made on YouTube a while ago of all the countries that I've been to. So this is a YouTube draw, or a Patreon or a Pinterest, a Procreate drawing I made of the countries that I've been to and a food that I ate in each one. So we have, this is some Ribena, which I had when I went to England. That's a dango I had in Japan. That's hagelslaw I had in Holland. That is something I had in Chile. I forget what it's called. That's a horse meat steak I had in Luxembourg. Those are curry fries I had in Ireland. Mole I had in Mexico. Currywurst I had in Germany. The cookie, the Purim cookie I had in Israel. Mussels I had in Brussels. Shrimp sandwich I had in Sweden. And French silk pie I had in the United States of America. So those are all of the countries that I have been to. All right, I see a super chat here I need to answer. Another YouTube commenter says, hot or cold weather and why? I really like hot weather. I love it when it is sunny out. It is my favorite thing in the world. I wish that I lived a place where it was warmer and we got more than 3 sunny weeks a year. This is why it is my lifelong dream to move to California, because the hot weather is just aces and I really don't like the winter at all. Hey, my friend Nacho Raj, thank you for the super chat, my friend. Just dropping in here. Have you ever visited India? Love your videos and art. Well, thank you very much, my friend. I have not been to India. Definitely a country I really want to go to. Definitely a country I really want to learn more about. I was doing some drawing recently of Hindu gods on my Instagram, and I was learning a little bit about Hindu culture, and I realized how little I know. But Hindu culture and sort of the culture of the Hindu Indians really seems quite fascinating to me. Everybody's fascinating is kind of the Japanese culture. You know, I think a lot of whiteys like me often fetishize the culture of Japan. They think, oh, it's so fascinating. Their art and their, handicrafts and all of this is so cool. And, I have all this Japanese folk art and stuff. But when I was learning about sort of Indian Hindu culture, I realized that there's this whole other world of a fascinating foreign culture that I know nothing about. And I would love to be able to dig into it more. And it would be fascinating to go to India and see not just the Hindu culture, but, the culture of the Indian Muslims and the Punjabs and all the rest of it. So my friend Mace gives me a 50 Norwegian kroner super chat, but the message has been deleted. So that is unfortunate. But thank you for the super chat, my friend. How much? Okay, Google, how much is 50 Norwegian kroner in Canadian dollars? $6 Canadian. Well, thank you very much. Okay, my friend Darius Dillon says, when did you first develop an affinity for the USA? Probably when I was a kid, and we went to the USA every summer on a holiday. So when I was a small child, when I was in elementary school, when I was in grade school, every summer, my parents and my sister and I, we would drive down the West Coast. We would drive from British Columbia to Oregon. And every summer we would go to Oregon, and we would stay in the same hotel every year, and we would hang out at the beach on the Oregon coast. Lincoln City, I think, was the city where we went in Oregon. And it was awesome, and I loved it. And going there was always the highlight of the year for little JJ. And America, to me, was this really exciting place with all these different shops and foods and, nice weather and, fun things to do. And that sort of really made me develop an affinity for it. And then as I got older and I sort of became more familiar with the kind of anti-American culture of Canada, it always seemed so incongruous to me. It never seemed clear to me why people hated America so much when my American experience had always been one full of, fun adventures and nice people and cool things to see and do. So I think that having exposure to America, and my parents were always very pro-American too. They were always very celebratory. And when we would go down to the States, they would always say, oh, the States, isn't it great? Aren't we happy to be here? Charles Summers says, would you dab for the server? If you missed it, you missed it. All right, got some more super chats here. My friend Ian Laurent de Costa says, how the frick do you keep your hair that well? I also have thick curly hair when it grows, and I grow birds. Well, I think that when you see my hair on camera, it looks better than it does in reality. I always feel like my hair is really dry and looks kind of bird's nesty. You also can't see quite how much gray hair I have, but I have quite a lot of gray hair. It's something that always surprises people when they meet me in person for the first time. But I do think that the camera makes my hair look better than it is. But, in terms of practical hair maintenance tips, I do try to wash my hair every day. I think that's important. I think that sometimes people think that you can overwash your hair, but my mother, who is a hairdresser, says that that is not the case. I do use high quality hair products as well because my mother is a hairdresser, so that probably helps as well. You know, I use very expensive shampoo, very expensive conditioner, and I use a lot of sort of creams and stuff in my hair to sort of keep it nice and fluffy during the day. I also use the hair dryer, which I think is a useful thing to do. I didn't do that until quite recently, but no, I would say my hair is probably overrated overall, I'm afraid. Let's see, next question. Malboy MTB, thank you again for the super chat, my friend. Why didn't you like Japan, asking as an Aussie who wants to teach in Japan? So I taught in Japan 10 years ago. 10 years ago this year, in the year 2009 to 2010 was when I was in Japan for a full calendar year, December 5th to December 5th. And so I guess it was all of 2009. Yeah, anyway, I was there for a full calendar year. And I was very miserable. It was probably the worst year of my life, I would say, all things considered. I mean, it's been so long now that I can kind of be sort of sentimental and nostalgic about it because the feelings are not quite so strong anymore. But the problem was multiple. I did not like the job that I was doing at all. Being an English teacher in Japan was a very monotonous, stressful, boring job that I was not qualified to do. You know, I worked at a private tutoring company, sort of like, I don't know if you have these sorts of things where you live, but there's like, I know in parts of America, there's like the Kumon math tutoring service or Sylvan learning service or things like that. That's the kind of teaching that I did. And it was very repetitive and very monotonous. Like, you know, you're just showing the kids the book. This is an apple. Can you say apple? Apple, apple. Like, you know, just real root memorization type of stuff. And I didn't like the management of the company that I worked for. You know, Japanese work culture is very weird and very different than our own. It's very strict and very, you know, based around you do what you're told, and that the employees really are not engaged in a kind of collaborative work environment. Things are very formal. They're not casual at all. And yeah, and I mean, I was also I felt very alone. I felt very cut off from my friends and family. I didn't feel like I was improving myself in any way. I didn't feel like I was gaining valuable skills. And I found the Japanese to be very closed and not very warm or hospitable. It was very difficult to make friends. It was very difficult to even just talk to Japanese people. You know, when I've gone to Europe, you know, people can speak English generally. Middle-class people can speak English. And people are also interested in you as a foreigner. And that was really much not the case in Japan. So, you know, it's a very big topic. You know, I should make a video about this someday. I'm just kind of giving a superficial overview. But it was basically just not a good time for me. Hold on one second. I'm just going to close the window because I'm getting too much noise. Okay. My friend Juan from Mexico says, what do you think of nuclear electric energy? I think that nuclear energy is probably fine, all things considered. Sometimes I don't really get the cult of nuclear energy, if you know what I mean. Like, I feel like these days there are some people that are like really, really, really into nuclear energy, who like really think it is like the bee's knees and that all of our problems about anything would be solved if we could just do more nuclear energy. And that has always seemed like a bit of an oversimplification, light and grace of the world, the way that some nuclear energy boosters seem to believe. So, okay, Danny, thank you for the super chat, Danny. $10. Wow, nice. JJ, have you ever heard of Mackinac Island, the island in Michigan where cars are banned and only horses and bikes are allowed? I think I have heard of that, actually, because if I may link this back to the previous question, when I was in Japan at the school where I taught, my coworker was an American girl. There was 2 foreign teachers and like 4 Japanese teachers, and the other foreign teacher was a girl from Mexico, and she was from Michigan, and she was very into sort of the outdoors and animals and this sort of thing. And I believe she taught me about the Mackinac Island at some point? Because this sounds familiar. About you could only use horses. Yeah. Okay, Arjan Sahota. Arjan. It's like an Indian name. Favorite Canadian dollar bill? That's a good question. Are we talking present or in all of history? Because I mean, I think that the new bill is kind of cool. The new $10 bill, the horizontal or the vertical. What is her name? God, I should remember her name. The black woman who's on the bill, the first woman of color to ever be on a Canadian bill. It's Violetta something or Viola Desmond. Yes. And yeah, I think that bill is really cool design. And I liked the bills, I think it was like 2 generations ago. I think it was called the Discover Canada series. Those ones were really cool. I thought that those ones had a really nice design, a design that's better than the current design. I think it's called Discover Canada. Let me just look this up for a second because I want to make sure that I remember when these bills came out when I was in high school, and it was the Canadian Journey series. Yes, the Canadian Journey series I think are the best looking of any sort of Canadian money. Should I do a video on Canadian money? Be like half asleep, Chris? Travis Wood says, hello again, JJ. Asking a non-political question is really hard. Can you show us a few of your favorite knickknacks from your desk? Oh my, well, it's a good question for old man JJ. Knickknacks for sure. You guys probably saw this. This was something that I obtained relatively recently from Chile. It is like a traditional Chilean piggy bank. I just thought it was really cool, and all of the Chilean people I showed it to were really excited when I saw them. Here's something I got recently. Do you know what this is? This is like a real sort of classic old-fashioned American toy where when you press it, the eyes and the ears and stuff pop out. I've always wanted to have one of these. This is like a real old-fashioned thing. This is like a toy from like the 1950s. So I was pretty keen when I got one of these recently. I have my ranch dressing that I got in Iowa. I'm going to keep this on the shelf till it goes bad. This I bought when I was in LA. It is a Mexican dreidel of some sort. I'm not really familiar with the game that it's for, but I thought it was pretty cool. This is something I got in Japan. This is called a jizu, which is like a little sort of Buddhist kind of thing. It's supposed to be a... I mean, I think it's for lots of different things, but one of the things it's for is like for safe travels. Like I think you give it to somebody when you want them to have a sort of safe journey somewhere. So it's kind of like, it's my little guardian angel when I go on all of my trips. So let's see if I have, let me think of one more thing. Oh, this is a funny thing. This is a, when I was a young boy, when I was a little kid, I went to this daycare center because of course I was a latchkey kid that did not, who had 2 working parents. So after school, I would just go to the daycare. And the woman that ran the daycare, Mrs. Merrington, was very strict. And she had some toys that you could never play with for some reason. They were up on this high shelf. And she had this little wind-up Pac-Man that I always wanted to play with, and I always wanted, and I never could. And a few years ago, I saw it for sale, or I saw one of it for sale at a flea market, and I was able to buy it. And that was an important moment of closure for me, that I finally got that toy that I'd always coveted as a child. So hopefully you enjoyed that little survey. Thomas Hart, thank you for the super chat, Thomas Hart, for your £5 of British money. JJ, have you ever been to Wales? If you have, what do you think about the Welsh government's attempt to keep the Welsh language alive? I have not ever been to Wales. And I must say, I don't want to insult the Welsh people, but I am generally very skeptical of government efforts to keep dead languages alive. I feel like this is not generally a good use of government money. And I feel like governments really should not be in the business of trying to turn their people into a certain patriotic ideal. Like, I don't really think it's the job of the government to try to make their citizens like into these perfect nationalistic creatures, you know, and that includes like pushing languages on them that they don't want to speak because the government has decided that there is some sort of national interest. And it doesn't seem like the Welsh language is really catching on with the Welsh people. So it seems like a bit of a flop, as I think it's predictably is going to be. You know, I think that language is a tool of communication. It is not something, language is something that you speak because you have a need to speak it. You have a communicative need to speak it to your fellow man. It is not something that you learn because some government somewhere has decided it would make the country more patriotic if you spoke it. Okay, super chat from my friend S. Fad. Thank you very much for the generous donation, my friend. What do you think about the Bible and the Christian Heritage Party? I love your work and appreciate the conservative-leaning opinions that are hard to come by in Canada. Well, thank you, my friend. So the Christian Heritage Party is a fringe party. I talk about it a little bit in my fringe Canadian political parties video. Here we are talking about politics, even though this is supposed to be the non-political chat. But the Christian Heritage Party is it's a fringe party for like real fundamentalist Christians. Because like evangelical Christians, you know, just generally conservative Christians tend to vote for the Conservative Party. But like the real fundamentalists, like the ones who are like very, very, very pure in their Christian belief, who will not accept any pragmatic compromise on issues about, you know, LGBT stuff or abortion or any of this kind of stuff, like they vote for the Christian Heritage Party. And it's an extremely small minority of people that do that. I think it's something like 30,000 voters in the last election voted for Christian Heritage. So yeah, it's just like it's not considered an influential party at all. It's a party that I think most Canadians are probably aware of because they're always on the ballot, and you know sometimes they have posters and things and flyers and that. But yeah, I don't even think they play the role of the spoiler. Like I think that the amount of votes that they get is just so marginal that yeah, it's not really worth much except as a curiosity. What I think about the Bible is I think the Bible is good and important, and an important part of our culture and our civilization. So that's what I think about that. My friend John Morden says, "What do you think about Hispanics that are Republicans?" Well, thank you for the super chat. Well, I think that people can support any party they want for whatever reason they want. You know, Hispanics are people like anybody else. I mean, I guess the stereotype would sort of say that a Hispanic who is a Republican is probably a Hispanic who has quite conservative views on immigration, which is entirely their right, you know. Not the Republican Party is obviously under President Trump is a very harsh anti-immigrant party, anti-illegal immigration in particular, but also seems to be broadly anti-legal immigration as well. You know, the majority of Hispanics in America are either immigrants or, you know, like the immediate descendants of immigrants, second generation Americans. And so I guess if you're a Hispanic or if you're an immigrant of any sort, and you support the Republican Party, you sort of have to reconcile those kind of beliefs in some ways. In the same way that if you're a gay Republican, you have to reconcile your support for the Republican Party with a party that has been broadly anti-LGBT for most of its existence. So, you know, I'm not opposed to people having non-stereotypical political identities, but I think that you have to be aware that there is a unavoidable discomfort there when you're supporting a party that has devoted a lot of its mental energy to opposing something that you would see as being in your interests. Okay. Fried Fish Fillet says, on the topic of fringe political parties, what are your thoughts on secessionist parties in Quebec and California? Well, the Quebec secessionist movement is obviously we're talking so much about politics. It's supposed to be a non-political chat. The Quebec secessionist party is a powerful party that's part of a large and entrenched movement in Canada that dates back, you know, many decades. So it's an important movement, and it's one that, you know, you have to take seriously because it's a very important part of Canadian politics and Canadian culture more broadly. So I think it's not to be minimized, and you know, you just kind of have to engage with it as a sort of it's like sort of saying like, what how did you phrase it? What are your so it's sort of like saying like, what are your thoughts on the right wing, or what are your thoughts on the left wing? Like it's you know, it's not a cause that I feel particularly strongly about one way or another, but it's part of the Canadian political discourse. and deserves to be taken seriously on those grounds alone. In California, however, I think that by any demonstrable stretch, the secessionism is an extremely fringe movement and not something that is worth taking seriously, because I don't think there's much indication that it's treated as anything but a sort of, sort of like an intellectual thought exercise that you might see an editorial written about in the newspapers from time to time. But it's definitely not a movement that has any sort of seriousness on par with the Quebec secessionism. All right, my friend John and Paul once again sends me a super chat. How on earth is Prince Edward Island its own province? Well, it's a good question. Prince Edward Island is its own province, mostly just because of history. Prince Edward Island was a separate British colony in the early days of Canada. They chose not to join Canada in 1867 when the Canadian Confederation was established. They joined later. I forget when exactly, around the time that British Columbia joined, I guess, like the 1870s or so. And I think, frankly, that the Canadian government made a bad move, because the Prince Edward Islanders thought that they could go it on their own, and they kind of were very proud. They ran their colony into the ground. It was in terrible economic shape. And yet Canada allowed it to join this country as an equal province, when I think it probably should have been absorbed into one of the other provinces. But because it was a separate colony is why it's a separate province. Mark Mayonnaise says, hey, JJ, I'm stuck just across the strait in Victoria. Have you ever considered making a video on the history of BC? I absolutely have. In fact, I even have over here, is this where it is? I've already, sorry, it's my Mexican bingo card is in the way. I think I've already, I've already started making the scripts. The thing though is that I want to do a lot of travel when I make my history of BC video. I want to go to Victoria. I want to go to New Westminster. I want to go to Barkerville. I want to go to like the historic. I want to go to the last spike in Revelstoke. I want to go to all the big historic areas, and obviously I can't do that right now. I was planning on doing it in the summer anyway, when the weather is better. All right. The Kiwi Industry says, any obscure places you would want to travel to? Yes. I feel like I would really like to go to the Balkans. I would really like to visit Serbia. Serbia, I think, is a place I'd like to visit, but also sort of like the surrounding countries, just because I feel like I would like to see, I mean, it sounds like a very sort of condescending thing when I say it, but I feel like I would like to see a sort of part of Europe that's a little bit poorer, that's not sort of, because I spent a lot of time in Western Europe, but I would like to see sort of like poorer Eastern Europe and just sort of like see how their culture is different. And I mean, Serbia, Montenegro, Herzegovina, all of those sorts of places, they've obviously been very troubled places as well. And I think that would be sort of interesting to see and sort of humbling to see. I feel like I would like to get out of the first world a little bit and sort of see some places where perhaps the standard of living is a little bit lower. When you visit Western European countries, I mean, they are culturally different, but they sort of exist on a continuity with like America and Canada. Whereas when I was in Chile, I think it was really the first time that I'd been in a country that felt like the standard of living was quite a bit lower, and that the people had experienced a type of life that was quite different from my own. And I think that's valuable. I think it's important that you realize that not everybody has the same sort of things that you do. Kyle W. Franken says, thank you for the super chat, my friend. I noticed that you have a native sticker on your corkboard. Have you been to Colorado in the past? And if so, did you like it? I have not been to Colorado, I'm afraid, but one of my friends from Colorado sent that to me. I haven't been accepting mail anymore because my apartment is already so full of crap as it is. But I do love some of the artifacts that I've gotten from people over the years. And that native sticker is one of my favorite ones, just because clearly it's something that if you're a Coloradan, you immediately recognize. Okay, let's see here. JJ, I'm subbed to your Patreon, says Travis. Thank you for the super chat, Travis. I'm subbed to your Patreon because I think your content is deserving of $5 a month. Well, thank you so much. So I don't really care that there's no content on there, but I must ask, will there ever be maybe a meetup? Yeah, I'm sorry that I don't have any content on my Patreon. I honestly just can't think of anything to produce there. I make a video every week. I write a column a week for the Washington Post. Like, producing that much content is already a bit of a struggle. So to create additional content for the Patreon, I'm afraid it's just something that I've never quite figured out how to do. But I've had a lot of fun doing the meetups that I've done so far. Haven't done a Vancouver meetup yet. just because I feel like that seems a little intense to do a meetup where I live. But once this all situation goes away, I'm sure I will. I've had nothing but good experiences. Because I have such smart fans. You know, you guys are really cool people, and I've had nothing but good experiences hanging out with you guys. And you're so smart, and it's fun to talk with you. So I'm keen to do it again in a whole bunch of different cities. Alex Winter says, "What are your thoughts on the Insane Clown Posse?" Insane Clown Posse, it's fine. I've don't know if this will make you guys think much less of me, but I've enjoyed the occasional ICP song on occasion. I mean, I don't like some of their sort of like real screamo type music, but some of their songs are kind of like, I think, somewhat lyrically funny and charming in their own way. That one song, Homies, I think is not a bad song. But I'm a person that has very bad taste musically. Like, I will listen to like any random crap band or song and be like, oh, yeah, this isn't so bad. So like, I'm super agreeable when it comes to music. So you can probably name any band and I'll be like, yeah, they're not so bad. Okay, let's see here. Ty says, thank you for the super chat, Ty. Would you ever think of doing a video on the different waves of immigration in Canada's history by region? Yeah, I think that could be a very cool idea. I have a very excellent book that's called The Canadian Family Tree, which is a really good book. And it's all about the migration patterns of immigrants to different parts of the country and how different types of immigrants have shaped different parts of Canada. So I think it would be fun to do a video based on that book. So yeah, that's a great idea, Ty. Super chat from my friend SFAD. Thank you again for the super chat, my friend. You are a political figure in Canada, so it's difficult to not be political. How do you see the provinces in Canada splitting, hypothetically, if they became their own state or province? If the provinces in Canada split up, I think that the most logical way that they would split up would sort of be a divide between generally like urban and rural, and I would say probably north and south as well. You know, most provinces in Canada, as is the case with most states in the US, are sort of defined by like a sort of metropolitan core and in a sort of like rural hinterland, right? And these two areas are often, you know, they don't necessarily have a lot in common, and a lot of the political sort of voting patterns and whatnot are very much divided on those grounds. You know, the rural parts are conservative, and then the urban part is very liberal. And then the urban part, of course, dominates because there's more people there, and so it dominates the whole sort of system politically. So if any province of Canada was to split up, it would sort of probably cleave in that sort of way. You know, like if Vancouver was to, or sorry, if British Columbia was to split off, you'd sort of have the greater Vancouver area as being like one province, and then sort of like the rest of sort of like the rural interior, as we say, would sort of be its own thing. Although even like the rural interior parts are distinct enough from one another that you could imagine it being split up into multiple chunks as well. You know, northern British Columbia does not necessarily have a lot in common with sort of the eastern British Columbia, even though they're both sort of underpopulated compared to the big cities. My friend, that one Kansas guy, says, you deserve 1 million subs. Thoughts on Kansas? Well, thank you, my friend. I would love to have 1 million subs. Doesn't seem like it's going to happen for at least like another 10 years, though. Thoughts on Kansas? Seems nice. My good YouTube pal, Mr. Beat, is from Kansas, and he seems like a fine young man. So I've got nothing bad to say about Kansas. Bob Dole is from Kansas, and he was pretty good. I don't know that much about the state, though. It would be fun to go there. I will refrain from indulging in any Kansas stereotypes, but I'm sure it'd be a cool state to go. I'd love to go to every state. You know, if I had the capacity to visit all 50, I would. Saggy Bones, $2 super chat. Thank you, my friend. Are you interested in learning any other languages? You know, this makes me sound like a real Philistine, but no, I'm not interested in learning any other languages. I'm happy that I speak English. I'm happy that I speak the world's most useful language. I'm happy that the language that I speak can allow me to communicate with so many different people all over the world. You know, I think I'm very, very privileged, very fortunate that I can speak English. That is such a useful language. And I think that calls for a degree of humility and awareness of my own privilege as an English-speaking person. But I don't feel like that I have any pressing need to learn another language. And I feel like if I was to learn another language, it would mostly either be out of idle curiosity, which I don't really have. I'm not really interested in language, or out of some sort of guilt complex in which I would feel like I should learn another language because there's sort of something morally wrong with being a unilingual English speaker. And yeah, I just don't feel that way. My friend Boy Zheng, sorry if I'm butchering your name, my friend. How do you feel about the Founding Fathers? How do you feel about the Founding Fathers complex as an ideology? How is it relevant besides patriotism? I don't really know what you mean. The Founding Fathers complex. If this is something particular, I'm unfamiliar with it. But I think that it is important to understand the ideology of the Founding Fathers, just because, you know, these are the people that wrote the Constitution of the United States. I think that the Constitution of the United States is an ambiguous document, and I think it is worthwhile to understand some of those ambiguities by understanding the mindset of the Founding Fathers, you know, by reading the Federalist Papers and all this sort of thing. I think that that matters. I'm not like a strict originalist in the sense that I think that the mind of the Founding Fathers is the only thing that matters when it comes to reading the Constitution or interpreting sort of the limits and the powers of the federal government of the U.S. But I think it's important. I think it's one of many things you have to sort of take into consideration. I mean, America has obviously changed tremendously since the time of the Founding Fathers, and they would have wanted it to change too. I don't think that when you read or study them, you see a bunch of men who had a vision of government that was sort of stagnant. I think that they wanted a country that was going to be flexible and adaptable. So I think that while their views on things are worth heeding, they're not they're not worth worshiping. Varinder Sindhu, $2 super chat. Thank you, my friend. But I see you deleted your message. What do we have next? Okay, Pedro says, or Pedro, this is Real, so this is from Brazil. So Pedro, what are the best and worst flights you've ever flown? What is the most obscure flight you've ever taken? Probably this is a great question. Thank you, my friend. One of the most obscure flights I think I've ever taken is I have taken flights from Seattle to Vancouver, which is really strange because it is so close. You know, it's like a 3-hour drive or something, or maybe it's a bit more than that. But it's quite a short drive. And so, but sometimes when I've been flying back to Canada from the US or from some other country, they make me do a stopover in Seattle and then fly from Seattle to Vancouver. And that flight is so weird and so pointless. It is like a half an hour flight. It's like the second you get into the air, you immediately start descending. And that is like one of the shortest and weirdest, and I would say probably most obscure flights I've ever taken, just in terms of like the novelty of it. The worst flight I've ever taken was the flight when I came back from Japan to Vancouver 10 years ago. I had to do a stopover in South Korea. And as we were flying back, I was so sick. I don't know why. I was really sick to my stomach, and I actually had to throw up. I had to use the stupid bag and everything. And I've never been sick like that on a flight before, nauseous, but for some reason I was, and that was really an unpleasant experience. And I was so stressed, and I was so anxious, and I was so tired that like my whole, everything about me after enduring a year on Japan, I was just so out of sorts. So that was a pretty brutal trip. Best flights? Best flights, in all honesty, like I'm 6 feet tall, so like I'm not super tall, but I'm a relatively sort of big, lanky guy. The best flights are whenever there's somebody not sitting beside me. I once had a flight, I can't remember when this was. This was relatively recently. I think when I was in Europe or something. But I once had a flight where there was just no one beside me at all. So I was sitting in a row of 3 seats, and I was the only one there. So I was able to stretch out, and, that was an awesome flight. Make as much of a mess, put all my crap beside me, just sort of burrow in like a little mole. That was a really nice flight. I can't remember where it was, but clearly left an impression on me. Okay, JB the Mighty says, thank you for the super chat, my friend. I think you once said you don't drink. As an Englishman, I cannot imagine not drinking. Why don't you partake? Well, this is what I always say when people ask me this. Is I say that I don't think that the onus is on me to explain why I don't drink. I think the onus is on other people to explain why I should drink. And all of the reasons that people have been able to muster of why I should drink have never struck me as particularly persuasive. I mean, drinking is bad for your health. It's a waste of money. There's a lot of other better things to drink that don't get you drunk and don't, potentially develop a crippling chemical dependency. So I am very down on drugs of any sort, and I don't drink caffeine. I don't smoke or do any drugs. So I have a very sort of commitment to a kind of clean living. So yeah, that's basically why I don't drink. There's nothing about it that has ever seemed compelling to me. My friend Johnny Minogue, sorry, I'm terrible at names. Johnny says, have you seen Schitt's Creek? Are you a Schitt's Creek fan? Moria Rose is my Moria. Oh, God, I cannot say names to save my life. This is clearly some sort of actress on the show. I've seen a little bit of the show. People really like it. My gay friends all sort of really like it because I guess it's sort of campy in a way that they find compelling. I've seen it. It's fine. It just struck me, I'm sorry if you're a really big fan of the show. It struck me as just a very relatively ordinary kind of sitcom. I didn't really get what all the fuss was about, I must say. My friend D. Joseph says, coffee or tea? How do you take it? I drink tea. I don't drink coffee because I don't drink caffeine. I've never had decaf coffee. I guess, actually, that's not true. I did try a sip of some decaf once, and it was just so bitter. I hate it because I've never drank coffee before. So it's my palate is so ill-equipped to deal with it. And so when I tried a little sip of decaf, it just struck me as the most bitter, terrible, awful thing I'd ever drank in my whole life. And I wanted nothing to do with it. I do drink tea a fair bit. I drink decaf tea. I always drink it black. I don't like to put milk into the tea very often. And I like chai tea a lot. That's my favorite. But usually what I drink when I go to Starbucks or whatever is I usually drink hot chocolate. I'm a really big fan of hot chocolate, even though most places cannot make a decent hot chocolate to save their life. My friend says, can you put mailing address below for some weird items? You are buffering slightly. Oh, I'm sorry if I'm buffering slightly. I'm doing my best here. I'm not accepting mail from fans anymore, I'm afraid, my friend. Like I said earlier, I have a pretty small apartment. What you can see is basically what I live in. And yeah, and I just don't have the space to keep accumulating people's little knickknacks. I wind up having to throw a lot of it out, and that always makes me feel sad because I know that you guys put a lot of effort into sort of accumulating nice little collections of objects for me. But until I get a bigger apartment, I really cannot justify continuing to accumulate just little knickknacks and stuff. So I've had to put a kibosh on that, I'm afraid. Okay. My friend Deg Hills says, what are your thoughts on the culture and community surrounding Commercial Drive in Vancouver? Do you find yourself in that area very often? So Commercial Drive is this kind of sort of iconic, sort of bohemian sort of neighborhood in Vancouver. I go there a fair bit. There's the Harabe Ethiopian restaurant, which is one of my favorite restaurants in the entire city. I like to go there. I like to go there on dates. Always impresses the guys that I'm with that I'm so cultured that I go to Ethiopian restaurants. So I like going there. There used to be a Vietnamese restaurant there that I used to really like called the Red Pagoda, but it's gone now. And some of my best friends used to live in a house on Commercial Drive. So I used to go to see them a lot. It's fine, I guess. I mean, it's a little gritty for my taste. It doesn't really have very good shopping. It's mostly a place that you go to for restaurants or to see your friends. So it's fine. I mean, it's definitely not a place where I think I would want to live, but it definitely has more than a few redeeming qualities. Definitely, if you're ever a tourist in Vancouver, it's definitely a place that's worth seeing. My friend Hungary Country Ball says, do you think the Sonic franchise is failing every year? I must say, my friend, I do not have very strong opinions on the Sonic franchise, even though one of my best friends is the cartoonist Sam Logan, who is probably one of the biggest Sonic Sonic experts in the entire world. He loves Sonic so much, and so I've sort of accumulated a fair bit of Sonic knowledge from him. My understanding of sort of the Sonic franchise is that it really is very erratic, that Sonic games are either really good or really bad, and there's not a lot of middle ground between them. But it has certainly been a long time since I've played a Sonic game, so I don't think I can offer much particularly deep commentary on that. My friend Nestor says, have you ever heard or played Nation States? I'm a regular on there, and some threads on the forum have mentioned you. Oh, well, that's very kind of them, I guess, of these strangers to mention me. I've never played Nation States. I don't know much about it. I know that it's like a sort of simulation game, and I'm not really much of a simulation game person or like a strategy game type of person. I don't play a lot of games, and the games that I like to play tend to be like kind of like fast-paced action games. So yeah, I'm not very familiar with it. I also, this is a sort of weird thing about me, I guess, is that I've never really had that much interest in sort of combining my interest in politics and history into those sorts of realms, Like, I've never really thought much about, like, when I'm engaging with politics or history, I don't often think like, oh, well, I wish there was a way I could play a game about this, To me, like, learning and writing and thinking and talking about it is kind of enough. I don't really want it to be in my entertainment as well. Wigs Biggs from Toronto, thank you for the super chat, my friend. What are your favorite 3 SNES games? Okay, that's a good question. Probably Super Mario World, probably Super Mario World 2, and what would number 3 be? I like Mario RPG a lot. I haven't played that game in a million years. I don't know if it's held up as well as I remember it being. But that was certainly one of the games that I played the most when I was a kid. Played Super Mario RPG Inside Out. I used to like Earthbound a lot. I feel like I'm a little bit more lukewarm on it these days than I used to. But as you can tell, I'm a huge Mario fan. And so I think that if I was on a deserted island, I think if I had Super Mario World, Super Mario World 2, and Super Mario RPG, I'd probably be pretty happy. Mitchell Hendy, on the similar note, says, what is your favorite all-time video game? Well, probably Super Mario World, I would say. I just think like that's a game that I never get bored of. I can always play it again, and I can always be I can always find something to keep my my entertainment, my attention up. So I think it's really quite a masterpiece of video gamery, and yeah, that would be probably my pick. My friend gives me a $10 Australian. Mallboy MTB. Oh, thank you again for the super chat, my friend. And see you. Have a good time. Have a good night. Or good morning, whatever time it is in Australia. My friend Matt I says, hey, JJ, how did you get started in journalism? Also, I would recommend checking out Vietnam if you haven't already. Yeah, Vietnam would be a very cool country to go to, I think. Big fan of their food. I bet that they have quite an interesting culture as well, unlike anywhere else in Asia. Yeah, Vietnam would be really neat. Is that where you're from, Matt? How did I get my start in journalism? I get this question a lot. I probably should do a video about this at some point, because I'd like to have a video I could show people when they ask me this question, in particular young people who want advice in journalism. Basically, way back in the day, I had a blog that was quite popular. I drew political cartoons that were quite popular. And I was active on forums and stuff. And basically, like, my content, my blog became popular enough that people noticed it and editors noticed it. And I was eventually given a job. I was offered a job. My first journalism job was working for the Huffington Post. And that was an offer that I got directly because the editor of the time really liked the stuff that I was writing for my blog. And she said, you want to go work for the Huffington Post? And since then, I've been very lucky, because every journalism job I've had has just been kind of a leapfrog from one position to another based on editors noticing me at something else and then offering me new jobs. So it's like from the Huffington Post, I got noticed by TV producers and I started doing television work. And then through that, I worked for Looney Politics for a bit, the website that has sponsored my videos occasionally. And then I got picked up by the Washington Post. So I've been very fortunate, but it's all about getting noticed, I think, if you are passionate about journalism, passionate about political commentary, you should be doing it right now. You should have a blog, you should have a YouTube channel, you should have some sort of forum in which you can produce the content that you like producing, and then eventually, if it's good enough, it'll get noticed and you'll get jobs. My friend Gino X 1987 says, "Were you ever a fan of the cartoon series Reboot?" Yeah, I was a very big fan of the cartoon series Reboot when I was growing up. Reboot is a Canadian computer animated cartoon that I think was made partially here in Vancouver. I was very into it. I remember when I was in elementary school, or when I was in high school even, I would watch it every time there was a new episode, which I think was like at 7 p.m. on like Wednesdays or something. It was like the highlight of my week, watching a new episode of Reboot. Very good show. I don't know if it's held up well, but I feel like even as a kid, I appreciated that it sort of had a bit of a sort of like wry, somewhat mature humor to it. And there was a lot of in-jokes. There's quite a few Canadian in-jokes, which are pretty fun. I've thought about making a video about Canadian in-jokes in Reboot, but I kind of feel like the appeal for that might be relatively niche. But yeah, really good show. And I was had a friend actually that worked on the Reboot game, the Reboot video game in Electronic Arts in Vancouver. And that was such a cool experience for me because I got to go and visit the EA campus when he was working on the game and got to sort of see the animations and stuff and the clay models of the characters. And that was a fantastic time for little JJ. So yeah, Reboot was a big deal for me. That's why I was able to prattle on about it so long. Matthew McLeod says, "Hey, JJ, what are your thoughts on the universal basic income?" I'm actually working on a column about the universal basic income right now. I spent all day basically writing it for the Washington Post. I'm kind of critical of it just because I think that, hold on, let me see these notes that I wrote down. Okay, so the big arguments against universal basic income is that it's too expensive, which I think is perhaps might be the strongest case against it. No one that I've seen has ever come up with a plausible argument about how universal income, how literally like giving money to all Canadians or Americans could be financially sustainable. Everything about it strikes me as like the single most expensive government program in the history of mankind. Even if you get rid of all of the existing welfare programs, which some UBI advocates advocate and some don't. I think that it is too blunt. I think that, this is sort of like an argument that I'm making in the column, is I think that there's a case to be made for targeted financial relief. I don't think that every American or every Canadian is equally deserving of financial aid. And the other thing is that I do think that it has a corrosive effect on the value of labor. I think that one is actually a somewhat weaker argument compared to the other two. Like, I think that the biggest problems with UBI are much more sort of practical considerations, like how it would be paid for and if it would actually result in money going to the people that need it the most. But there's also sort of like a cultural critique to be made, which is to sort of say that it discourages work on some level, and I think that work is a virtue. So that's basically what I think about it. My friend James Irwin. Oh, thank you for the super chat, James. Thank you for your generosity. One more political question, says James. If Maxime Bernier had won the leadership contest in 2017, would he be prime minister today because he's less boring than Andrew Scheer? Or is he too fringe and too French? So this is obviously like the great sort of counterfactual of modern Canadian history, because I do think that Maxime Bernier losing the Conservative leadership race radicalized him in a way. So he became, Bernier became head of the People's Party, a party that he founded to be his own political vehicle. It eventually took kind of like a hard right turn into, sort of broadly, I think you could say, sort of xenophobic politics, certainly very restrictionist in immigration and that sort of thing. But I don't think it necessarily went without saying that was sort of a natural evolution for Bernier. If Bernier had become head of the Conservative Party, I think it's possible he might have run a campaign very similar to Andrew Scheer, because at that point he would have been the conservative establishment. You know, he would have probably had a lot of the same people working for him as Scheer did, and probably would have been a lot more cautious politically and less inclined to sort of stake out radical positions on immigration or anything else. And in that case, like, I think that he probably would have had a lot of the same problems as Andrew Scheer did. You know, like, at the end of the day, it is not obvious to me where Bernier could have been more compelling than Andrew Scheer. And that's ultimately like the challenge that any conservative leader faces. It's sort of like, how are you going to build a viable conservative coalition? Both Scheer and more particularly Bernier failed spectacularly to do that, pursuing two very different strategies. You know, Bernier tried running a very hard right platform. It got no resonance. Andrew Scheer tried running a very sort of, you know, centrist, moderate conservative platform, and it didn't get much traction either. I mean, Scheer held together what now seems to be sort of like the base minimum that any conservative leader will always get in any circumstance, but he didn't really grow it. He didn't expand it, and obviously he didn't win. So I think that the Conservative Party has a lot of real deep challenges facing it in this country, and it is not at all clear to me that it's simply a matter of getting a different leader in charge. I think that it has to have a different leader, but it also has to have a very clear, coherent, and compelling message. And yeah, that's just a real uphill battle. And I don't think that Bernier was a man with great political instincts overall. I don't think he was a great leader. And I don't think he would have been a particularly effective or persuasive leader of the Conservative Party had he won. So it's basically what I think about him. My friend Raphael says, have you been to Hoboken, New Jersey? I have not. Thank you for the super chat. I do not know much more than I can say than that. I've only been to New Jersey en route to New York. I've gone to the Newark airport and then rode the train into New York. But that's about all I've done as far as New Jersey goes. My friend says, can you talk more about flags, commission pennants? Sure. Do you mean right now or in general? Here's a preview for you guys. My Saturday video is going to be all about flags. It's another flag mystery video in which I solve the mystery of a few flags that you guys have submitted to me, and I think it's going to be a pretty good one. Look at this. Ugh. This is my this is the best book I think I've ever read on flags. It is called Flags Through the Ages and Across the World. It is a very beautiful book, very handsomely illustrated, that is all about the history of flags. If you ever want to buy a book about flags, this is probably the best one. It's an old book. It's from like the 1970s, but it's a beautiful book and really useful. Shane Sheffield says, hey, I remember you, Shane Sheffield. You've super chatted in the past. Why did your parents like the USA so much? I think part of the reason why my parents liked the USA so much is because both of them actually wanted to live in the USA at various points in their lives. My mother, who is an immigrant from Europe, her family wanted to immigrate to America, but they said they couldn't get in for some reason or another. Don't quite know why. So Canada, like as is the case with so many immigrant communities, was the runner-up, but only the runner-up after my parents, my grandparents tried to get into. They tried to get in. Sort of the family lore goes that they tried to get into America, then they tried to get into Australia, then they tried to get into South Africa, and then finally they tried to get into Canada, and Canada was willing to take them. But and my father wanted to move to New York. My other grandfather was a sort of wealthy stock broker, and he was given a job offer to relocate to New York. And my grandfather resisted or denied or refused that offer. And I think my father always resented my grandfather for that. And I think to this day, my dad really sort of sees that as the road that was not taken in his life that would have changed his life for the better. And so I think that that's one of the reasons why I think my father has actually often been very supportive of the idea of me moving to the US, the idea that that you know that I think there's a bit of vicarious desire on that part. Kevin Kevin Sosh. Kevin says, what is the worst province in Canada? The worst province in Canada, and this is not like a sort of statement on the people or the quality of the place, is I think just Prince Edward Island, because I think that Prince Edward Island has the least business being a province, and the fact that Prince Edward Island is a province really screws up, I think, the Canadian Federation in some ways. It is much harder to have a confederation of 10 equal provinces as long as you have a province as tiny as Prince Edward Island existing within the Federation. So by that definition, I would say it's the worst. Charles Rose. Oh, thank you, Charles Rose. I used to enjoy your show before all of the Me Too stuff. I'm kidding. Have you ever been to Minneapolis before? If so, what was your experience? I have been to Minneapolis before. In my video about New York, Minneapolis makes an appearance. On my way back from New York, I lost my passport and I got stranded in Minneapolis for a couple of days. But it wound up being a really great experience. I really love Minneapolis. I think it is a really cool city. Great people, lots of fun restaurants, really sort of fun, mellow way of life, really good shopping. I often fantasize about going back to Minneapolis just to go shopping. But it's a really cool place. I would really like to go back there again. I think I would like to live there if the weather wasn't so terrible. But it was really cool. One thing about Minneapolis that was interesting was the like how multicultural it was, like that there was a lot of immigrants there, a lot of Muslims there, and a lot of African Muslims as well. And they sort of really had a very sort of distinct impact on the community, exposing me to a lot of cultures that I had not previously encountered before, which I think really goes against the stereotype. You know, I think people think of Minnesota as being very sort of white and all American, and in many ways it is, but it is a kind of more diverse place as well. Travis Wood says, UBC or SFU? What municipality is the best in the Lower Mainland, and why is it Coquitlam? And I cannot wait for your BC history video. Oh, thank you, Travis. I can't wait for my BC history video either. I hope I do a good job. I went to SFU. I didn't go to UBC. I went to the University of Simon Fraser, not the University of British Columbia. And I'm quite loyal to SFU in the way that I think all university grads are loyal to their college. But UBC is a really, really nice campus, really beautiful place. I feel like I would have liked to have gone there if I could do it over. I would have liked to live on campus. That's a kind of regret of my life that I never had the live on campus experience. But yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful sprawling campus, and it's UBC is a fun place to get lost in. You know, I feel like there's so many nooks and crannies and obscure places where you can sort of wander off. That was always something that was compelling to me. Whereas SFU, you know, it's a self-contained campus located on the top of a mountain, right? Like you can walk around SFU, and I mean, there are some obscure areas, but I mean, it's one building. So I mean, you've seen SFU, you've seen it all. And best municipality in the Lower Mainland, I mean, I like Coquitlam a lot, actually. It's where I grew up. Coquitlam is quite good, actually. You know, Burnaby has its charms. I like suburbia, so I like the sort of suburban places. Daffy Titanic says, what are Canadian shows that you like? Well, the only real Canadian shows that I like, I think, are probably children's shows. So we talked a bit about Reboot earlier. I like Reboot. I think that was a good show. There was a cartoon show for kids, claymation show that I was quite fond of when I was a kid called Bump in the Night. I liked that show a fair bit. But yeah, I mean, I'm not really a very big fan of Canadian TV. I think a lot of it is just quite low quality and not really worth watching. Johnny Minogue. Oh wait, we already answered that question. Aaron Jimenez. Sorry, my nose is bothering me. Aaron says, have you watched Veep? I have watched Veep. I haven't watched a lot of it. I've watched, you know, an episode here or there. Maybe it's a show I should sort of watch through. I think it's pretty funny. I don't think it's great political commentary, though, because just have a hard time believing someone is just completely obnoxious as her could rise that high in politics. Like, really a woman with, like, zero redeeming qualities at all. Vieka says, thank you for the super chat. €5, 49 cents. Thoughts on metrification in Canada and North America in general? We had a question about this last week. If metrification is not something I would have supported in Canada, not because I have any great love for the imperial measurement system, but just because I think that it's important that Canada and the US stay on the same page as much as possible. And I think that this created a deviation between the two countries that has provided many decades of inconvenience. I think that having to set the cars in a different way, having to set the road signs in a different way, having to put metric and imperial on all of the packages heading to Canada, like all of this kind of stuff, I just think was an added burden that I don't really think benefited Canada in any real way. Like, in what way is Canada better off for adopting the metric system? I don't know. I really just don't think that this is really something that matters all that much, which system of measurement you use. I mean, how much does it impact somebody's daily life? Not very much. Santi Molina says, thank you for the super chat, my friend. Have you ever heard of anarcho-capitalism? I've heard of anarcho-capitalism, of course. It's like an extreme libertarian philosophy, but it's dumb as far as I'm concerned. Like, obsessing over like fringe political ideologies that have no manifestation in the real world really seems to me like a bit of a waste of time. Like, it just, like, it's fine, I guess, like as a philosophical principle, but it's just like there is no anarcho-capitalist presence in the modern sort of political discourse. There are no political anarcho-capitalist, commentators or politicians or newspapers or magazines. It's like, so why bother? Like, why identify with a tradition of politics that is so fringe that it is A, never going to be implemented, and B, like, most people are never going to understand your arguments. So I don't know. It seems kind of silly to me. Fibbly Dibbly Productions says, can you talk about commission pennants? A commission pennant is it's something on the ship, right? Like, it's the long, narrow strip that a boat has. So like a boat traditionally has several different types of flags. It has sort of the naval jack, which is like the flag at the back. And then it has the commission pennant, which is the long sort of streamer flag at the top. But beyond that, I don't know that much about it. I mean, these are all just sort of, these are like the flags that help you identify a ship. I talked a little bit about this in my popular video on secret second flags. Different countries technically have a commission pennant in the same way that different countries have naval jack flags. It's definitely like one of the most obscure sorts of flags. I don't even think that most ships bother to run them, except maybe like on ceremonial occasions. But it's I suppose it's a sort of fun type of flag to learn. I don't know. I don't have that much to say about commission pennants, I'm afraid. John and Paul says, how many different colored turbans do you think Jagmeet Singh owns? I think that old Jagmeet probably owns a turban of every color of the rainbow. I feel like I've seen him wear a turban of almost every color except for white and black and gray and brown. But I feel like I've seen him wear like yellow, orange, red, blue, green, purple. He pretty much wears every color. Walds Krieger says, if someone gave you money to fly anywhere where you haven't been before, where would you go? I would go to South Africa. It is the country I most want to take a trip to. Yeah, so South Africa is sort of the top on my must-go-to list right now, I would say. Let's just see here. My friend Samuel Carver, thank you for the super chat, my friend. 10 pounds. Would you ever go back to visit London? Yeah, I would like to go back to visit London. I was actually planning on visiting London this year before all of the unpleasantness happened. So I went to London once, probably close to like 15 years ago, maybe a little bit less. But I went to London. I had a good time. I was only there for like 4 days or something. But but yeah, it was a good time, and I'd like to spend more time in London. I would like to spend more time with British people. I don't feel like I spent that much time with British people last time. I was with my friend Edward, and we had a good time together. But I feel like I'd like to see, I was only there for 4 days, so it's a pretty condensed trip. And, I'm older now, and I feel like I would enjoy the trip probably a bit more. Jombers says, have you seen the Mario Maker update? Yeah, I saw a video about it yesterday. It looks pretty cool. Making maps. You can be the Mario Brothers 2 style. The final update. So I guess maybe I should go back to Mario. I haven't played Mario Maker in months. I'm not really good at video games, like in the sense that I'm not good at making time for them. I just feel like my life is very full of other things right now. I'm very busy. I like being productive. Video games, it's just hard for me to get into that mindset. I often kind of feel like it's something I'd like to do more with friends. Like I feel like video games can be a fun sort of social activity, but playing video games by yourself is often not that much fun. I get very distracted, and I just think about like, well, I wish I was drawing, or I wish I was working on my video. Like sometimes I play video games when I'm talking on the phone to somebody because it's kind of sort of fun to have mental stimulation that way. But yeah. Bagyon says, oh, thank you for the very generous super chat, my friend. Bagyon. Sorry, I cannot say anybody's name for the life of me. Says, what's up, JJ? I hope all is well. Here's a left field question. Do you have any advice for getting over the end of a seemingly perfect long-term relationship? I can't seem to figure it out, LOL. Oh, relationship advice. Haven't done much of that on the old live stream. That's a very difficult question, isn't it? I can't relate very much to it because I've never really been in a long-term relationship, let alone a seemingly perfect one. I don't know. I wish I could give you sort of more insightful comments on that. I mean, I guess that, no one, this is sort of a cynical thing to say, but it's a comment I learned from my old pal, the YouTuber Frank James, the other day, that in his live stream, and somebody asked him a sort of similar question. And what he said was that like a tough thing to make peace with when you're younger, but becomes increasingly obvious as you get older, is that no one is really irreplaceable, Like everybody is unique, everybody is special in their own way. No two people in this world are exactly alike, but the role that people play in your life is not exclusive to one person. When I was in Israel, there was an older couple that was on the tour that I was with. They'd both been married before, They both had spouses that at one time they were in love with, and at one time they would have thought were like the perfect person for them. But they both got divorced, and then they wound up with each other. They're both on their second spouse, right? And neither spouse was their second spouse, without getting too much into it. Like, I don't know their full story, but like they did replace their spouse with somebody else. They found a new partner, and now they're very much in love, and this new person sort of fulfills the role that the old person did. The old relationship didn't work out, but they have somebody new now. And these people just kind of had a kind of calmness about that I found very inspiring, that they were mature enough to realize that even late in their life, they were able to remarry and move on. And I think that that's kind of the attitude that you have to have at some point. Like, you kind of have to realize that this person was great. I was in a great relationship with them, and that they fulfilled a role in my life very beautifully, but they are ultimately replaceable. And there is somebody else out there that is going to be able to fulfill that role just as well. I just haven't met them yet. I just don't know them yet. But don't get into the mindset of thinking that relationships are a once in a lifetime kind of thing, because they're not. There will always be another person that will be able to fill that role in your life, because you're ultimately a good person, and you deserve somebody good, and somebody will really realize that you have good qualities, and will be able to love you and be a good partner to you in the way that other person was. So just think about that. Just think about how it's not a once in a lifetime experience, and that there will be somebody else someday. Adam Vanderplum, thank you very much for the generous super chat, my friend. You've mentioned before that you don't have the attention span for movies, yet you read a lot. Usually it's the other way around for most people. They lack the patience to read a book, but can easily watch a movie. Well, I'm afraid that reading books can sometimes be a bit of a struggle for me as well. When I read a good book, I get very into it and I want to read it all the way to the end. But there are other books that I read and it is a bit of a hassle. It is a bit of a struggle. So I don't want you to get the impression that like I'm a superstar reader. I think attention span stuff is something that I struggle with a fair bit. And I think that most people of our generation struggle with a fair bit because we live in a time in which we have access to so much sort of overstimulating media. And media that the second we get bored, like the second I get bored, if I'm browsing something on the internet, I can immediately tap and click and get to something else in a moment's notice. Like even right now, if I'm bored of the chat, well, I have another window open and I can just start browsing that, right? Like this kind of, this desire to just sort of opt out of an experience the very second it becomes even slightly dull is, I think, something that is kind of really unhealthy and is kind of a real dark side of the technological wonder world that we inhabit today. So, yeah, I mean, I guess movies just seem kind of pointless to me in a way. Like they always strike me as like something that you're kind of like trapped in. Like when you're reading a book, you can put it aside if you need to take a break for a couple of minutes and you can pick it back up. But in a movie, you're like literally strapped into the, like in the theater at least, you're strapped into the chair. You have to endure this for 2 straight hours. There's no sort of breaking it. And yeah, so I don't know. I don't like movies. Mega Man 94 MH says, favorite video game. Thank you for the super chat, my friend. I answered this a little bit earlier, but probably my favorite video game of all time is probably Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo. That is a game I can pick up at any moment and I can always get back into it. I think it's a real masterpiece. Okay, my friend Craig says, what camera and microphone do you use in your videos? What software do you use to edit? I can show you actually. So let me just get my camera. Okay, so here's my camera. This is a camera that I bought from my friend Maxwell a couple of years ago. It is a Lumix, so it's a Panasonic camera. Lumix GH2. I'm really a bit of an idiot when it comes to this kind of thing. But it's like it's an SLR camera. It's not super new. It's just relatively conventional. It's a digital camera. This is the microphone I use, a Rode mic that is attached to the top of the camera. It's pretty good, but this is basically all I have, and then I just have this on top of a tripod, and that's how I film myself. Right now, I'm using the webcam. If you notice, the quality is a bit worse. And to edit, I use Adobe Premiere Pro. That was the program that I was first taught to use. I mean, I've only been making videos for like 4 years or something. So I mean, like I'm not a super pro. It's the only software I've ever used and the only software I know. And it's been fine. I've never felt frustrated by it. So yeah, thank you for the super chat and thank you for the question. Okay, Nathaniel Thrush says, thoughts on Maryland, if any? Well, I don't have particularly strong thoughts on Maryland. I would like to visit Maryland because I would like to visit Washington, D.C., and can't do one without t'other. Maryland, I'm sure, has a sort of interesting culture. Actually, I follow a Maryland culture like souvenir shop or something on Instagram, which is quite amusing. So I feel like I've learned a few things about Maryland culture just from seeing that. So they often post memes about the crab spice, the Old Bay seasoning. They post a lot of memes about this. I know this is a very iconic Maryland thing. Like maybe I'll put it back on the shelf. And they post a lot of memes about crabs in general. I feel like crabs are a big sort of thing in Maryland culture. They post a lot of stuff about the flag. And they post a thing. Here, let me... I don't exactly know what this is, but I will try to draw it. Try to draw it for you. It's some sort of like character. I don't. It's like something like this. It kind of looks like the Pringles guy, except he only has like one eye, and he has like a mustache or something. I don't know what this is, but this is something that has to do with Maryland culture in some way because they post a lot of memes about it. Malboy MTB says, thoughts on the SkyTrain? Well, the SkyTrain is sort of like one of the preeminent sort of forms of public transportation in sort of the greater Vancouver area. It's a sort of monorail, light rail type thing. People get upset when you call it a monorail because I suppose it's not technically a monorail, but if you imagine what a monorail is, that's basically what it is. Yeah, it's great. I live quite close to a SkyTrain station, so I take the SkyTrain all the time, everywhere. Not now, not since the pandemic. I haven't taken it in months, but yeah, it's fantastic. I love the SkyTrain. I don't drive. Well, I can drive, but I don't drive. And I don't like taking the bus, so I'm always either walking or SkyTraining. Have you ever been to Lonsdale Meadows in Newfoundland? I don't know how you pronounce this, but I know where you're referring to, Devin. Thank you for the super chat. Devin is referring to this ancient Viking settlement in Newfoundland. They say it is the remnants of the very first European settlement in all of North America. I don't know why it has a French name. That's always struck me as a little weird because the Vikings were not French. But yeah, it's some ruins in Newfoundland. It's yeah, it'd definitely be a cool thing to see. I've never been to Newfoundland. I've never been to Atlantic Canada. My friend Christian Rolfson says, were you nervous when talking on national television? I'd feel like Big Brother was watching me while staring into the camera. Yeah, it is nervous. Every single time I think I was on television, I was a little bit nervous. Live TV is pretty scary because you realize that, like, you know, you're live, so you can't screw up because it's happening live. So if you screw up, everyone will see it, and then they'll probably make a viral video of you and shame you for the rest of your life. So yeah, that's pretty stressful. But you know, you do get used to it. Hopefully you can tell from my streaming, but I like to think I'm relatively fast on my feet when it comes to talking, that I'm relatively good at sort of improvising and filling the air with sort of idle babble. So it's definitely a sort of skill that you develop, but the first time you do it, it's definitely pretty freaky. But you know, like everything in life, it gets easier with practice. My friend Shane Sheffield, once again, another super chat from old Shane. Why was the Ireland video so controversial? Well, I'm glad you asked that, Shane, because I've been thinking about this lately. In the in my video that I posted last week about Simon Whistler, some people were like, "Oh, you're one to talk, JJ. Your Ireland video was terrible." And it's like, that video is so controversial, and I really do not understand why, except that the Irish are sensitive in a way that I just did not anticipate. You know, I had always thought of the Irish, like, you know, I don't want to overgeneralize because obviously, you know, the people that have downvoted that video so much and the people that are posting nasty comments about what a horrible person I am, you know, they're not representative of all Irish people, but they're obviously representative of a certain sample of Irish people. And I guess like that's a kind of sensitivity that I did not anticipate. Like there's a certain faction of Irish person that does not want you to talk about their country in anything but a very reverential way. They don't want you to have fun with it. They don't want you to be irreverent or make jokes or be sort of sarcastic or critical. They want you to talk about Ireland in a way that's like, Ireland's the greatest place in the world and we all love Ireland. And, you know, I underestimated that. I've never gotten a reaction like that, not even from the French Canadians, in a way that I've gotten a reaction from the way that I talked about Ireland. Which, when I think you watch that video, like, I think it's quite a mellow video. I don't say Ireland sucks. I don't say it's a terrible country. I just treat it the way I treat most things in life, which is, you know, with some degree of sort of sarcasm and attachment, and I have some fun with it, and I enjoy the experience of learning, you know. I don't know. It's certainly like not an inaccurate video. Like, I've made mistakes in videos and I'm self-conscious of those mistakes, But when I think about that Irish video, I don't think like, oh, that was a video I really screwed up a lot on, and oh, I'm so embarrassed about all the humiliating errors I made. No, I think it's a perfectly fine video, and I honestly do not understand why it is so controversial, and I don't feel bad about it because I feel like I would make it again. Thanks for answering my question, says Santi Molina. I'm from San Luis, Arizona, on the border with San Luis Real, Colorado, Mexico. What is your favorite country flag? I'd say one of my favorite country flags, like a question when people ask me this question, I usually say the Brazilian flag. The Brazilian flag is very elegant in its design, very iconic, very recognizable. It has distinct shapes and patterns. It has distinct symbolism, and it has very unique colors that are easily replicable and can become synonymous with the country. I think that choosing unique colors for your flag is very important because you want to use those colors again and again for sort of patriotic purposes. And so I think the Brazilians made a very good choice when they were coming up with their flags. Jeremy says, forgive me if you've explained this before. How did you develop your career in punditry? What is your origin story? I did explain this before. I actually explained this a little bit earlier in this very video. So basically, if I can sort of just condense it and tell the story again in a kind of quick way, I was a blogger for a long time. Well, not for a long time, but I was a blogger for a period of time. My blogging and my political cartooning were relatively popular in those days. I was going to say in the early days of the internet. I don't know if that's quite true, but you know, in an earlier time, like over a decade ago. And basically the stuff was popular enough that it got noticed. It got noticed by editors. It got noticed by television producers. And basically it's just by producing content that I've been able to get noticed, and I've been able to get gigs on television and working for journalistic outlets. So it's what my advice is to just always be producing stuff because you never know who might see it. Okay. Rowan says, thank you for the super chat. All right, time to simp. So JJ, Battlefield or Call of Duty, which is better? Well, my friend, I am afraid I have never played either of those games. I don't really like first-person shooters. Those games are first-person shooters, right? I'm not really big into violent video games. As we've probably seen from some of my other commentary, I mostly like cutesy, wootsy, hop and pop games. All right. Christina JP says, how's it going? It's going well, Christina. Although I noticed that the view count of this video is declining at a rather rapid clip. I think it's because I'm not talking about politics, and people want to talk about politics. That's the you know, it's funny because like I don't think of myself as having a political channel. I think of myself as having a channel that talks about a variety of things, including politics. But politics is what people are most interested in, and it's what gets me the biggest audience, you know? So this is something that I kind of have to struggle with. And I think it's something that all YouTubers have to struggle with at some point, is that the content that you make that is the most popular is not necessarily the content that you necessarily most enjoy making. So yeah, I mean, it's just some thoughts. I see somebody in the comments said that the one-eyed mustache guy is called Natty Bo. It's like a liquor company or something. Oh, National Bohemian. Huh. Well, more reason to go to Maryland, I guess. I have much more of their culture to learn. Yuki Kun says, hello from PH, from Philippines. Advice for someone who has ADHD. Jeez Louise, I don't know. ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Geez Louise, I don't know. I mean, this is obviously, it's a very particular sort of condition that, you know, you should seek advice from somebody who actually has, you know, professional experience, medical experience, understanding of what that condition is and what living with it entails. So I'm afraid that I can't really give you a very useful piece of advice, although I do appreciate you giving me 99 Filipino pesos. Hey Siri, okay Google, how much is 99 Filipino pesos in Canadian dollars?
Okay, found this on the web. For how much is 99 Filipino pesos?
Not Mexican pesos.
Dollars. Check it out.
Let me try this again. 99 PHP into CDN. So it's like $3. So thank you, my friend, for the super chat. Sorry that I didn't have something better to say. Mark Mayonnaise says, favorite non-educational YouTuber? Good question. Last time somebody asked me like what was some of my favorite YouTube channels, and I feel like I didn't give a very good answer. So let me just open up my subscription page right now, and let me just see if I can look at some of the things I subscribe to and maybe give you a good answer. I mean, I like Scott the Woz. He makes video game videos that I think are quite clever. Sometimes they're a little long, but I think he's pretty good at what he does. I kind of relate to him a lot because he makes weekly videos in the same way that I do. And I feel like, you know, not to toot my own horn, but I feel like we both put a fair bit of effort into making weekly videos in a way that a lot of YouTubers don't. You know, I feel like a lot of the high quality videos you tend to see tend to be monthly videos because it takes a lot of work to make a video with lots of graphics and sounds and stuff every week. So I have a lot of time for him. I'll tell you a weird video channel that I've started to like, which is really strange and really obscure, and you're going to think I'm crazy, but it's called Two Set Violin, and it is this channel about violins. And like, I do not know anything about violins. I don't like, you know, I don't have any particular affinity for violin music. I have no interest in learning how to play the violin, but it's these two Australian guys, and they just make these really funny videos that are just really well edited and really compelling. And they're all about violins and violin culture and classical music culture. And they're really brilliant. And I have a lot of respect for them. Now here's another good one. Wang, if you've ever seen him, he's an American fellow who makes videos about mysteries of the internet. I think he's quite a good storyteller, and I think he does quite a lot of good research. So I enjoy his videos as well. Boop, 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 boop. People always say, "Are you dating anyone?" But no, I'm not. I'm single. Bagyon says, thank you for your response. Less dramatic question. Have you ever played any games in the Civilization series? I have not. I have not played any games in the Civilization series. The thing you need to know about me, JJ, is that most popular things I haven't done. I have not, in addition to not having drank alcohol or drank coffee in my entire life, I have not seen most movies that are popular, and I have not played most video games that are popular, and I probably haven't read most books that are popular. So it is always a dangerous assumption to assume that I have done anything that most normal people my age have done. Nick Murray says, hi, JJ. I'm in university right now, halfway through psych and psychology or philosophy degree. Any recommendations on great classes that you enjoyed in uni? Thanks. Oh, that's a good question. It's funny, I was talking about this with somebody earlier today. I took like almost all of the history classes I really enjoyed. I took history of Japan. That was fantastic. I took lots of classes on the history of the US, which were all very good. All of the history of Canada classes I took were really good. So yeah, just take history classes. particular eras of history too. When you go really like in depth, I remember I took a history of like early Scotland, and that was like really interesting too. Sometimes like if you get into like these really sort of like narrow time periods, you really get really deep into the culture of a place, and that can be really fun. Took a lot of interesting history of France courses, in history of Germany. And I think you get to write a lot of fun papers when you do history courses too. History papers are fun to write because they're much more sort of narrative, and they're like storytelling. You know, they're not analytic in the way that a lot of other papers have to be. Travis Wood says, JJ, when did you start writing your blog? Were you still in school, or was that after? And did you join any clubs in school? I started writing my blog when I was in high school, sort of like the last few years of high school, because I remember I was updating it during the whole 9/11 and all of that, and that was when I was still in high school. Yeah, and I basically just kept running it for years and years and years. Did I join any clubs in school? When I was in university, I did. When I was in university, I was part of the student newspaper. That was very formative in my life. A lot of my friends are still people that I met when I was working at the university newspaper. And it helped me decide that journalism was indeed something that I was very passionate about. And I was part of the student government as well in university. And that was also quite formative. It was a very useful experience to me. It was very stressful for me. I was the administrator of the student elections for 2 years. I had that job. And that was really good experience. I felt, I don't know, it's just like useful being part of an organization. So if you're going to join a club, I advise to join the biggest club you can find, because you'll learn a lot more being part of a big club than you'll be part of a small club. All right, I've got a lot of good super chats here. Joe Spades says, have you ever been to any famous grave sites? I've got a pretty good answer for this one. My grandparents, my grandmother and my grandfather, are buried in the same cemetery as Terry Fox is buried. So in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Terry Fox, you know, the great sort of Canadian hero, he is buried there. And every time I go to that cemetery for some reason or another, which is not that often, it's always fun to see Terry Fox's grave. Sometimes I take friends to show off, you know, oh, my grandparents are buried in this cemetery, and guess who else is buried here? The thing that always strikes me as a little strange, to sort of go off on a bit of a tangent here, is that when you see Terry Fox's grave, you know, he's got a big, nice grave with a big picture of himself on it. And then on the one side is the grave of his father, and then on the other side is the grave of his mother. And both of their gravestones have big pictures of them with Terry. And it's just like, I mean, that's very heartwarming, obviously. But it also seems kind of, I mean, it's interesting to think, you know, that we all live different lives, and our lives have different purposes, and, you know, our purpose in life is different from person to person. And it's just always, it strikes me that there's something quite unique about having a life that was ultimately defined by your dead child's memory, you know? Mr. and Mrs. Fox, the second that Terry Fox died in when did he die? 1980, 1981 or something like that. But it's like for the rest of their lives were always defined in relation to their young dead son. And it's interesting to think of a life led in that shadow. Oh man, this is quite the complex name. Aryon Tran, I can't say it. But my friend from Brazil, 10 Brazilian real. Can we expect a Brazilian video soon, or was the thing in your background just a cameo? So in my last video, on my desktop wallpaper, I had a picture of a sort of Brazilian snack treat. And I did that on purpose because I know I have a lot of Brazilian viewers, and I was keen to see if you guys would notice. And you guys did notice, because Brazilians are very observant and are very good at noticing their own culture. So one day I will go to Brazil. One day I'll make a fantastic video all about Brazilian culture, but it's not coming anytime soon, I'm afraid. Sebastian says, thank you for the super chat, Sebastian. JJ, in your Who is JJ McCullough video, you said that you are a guy who likes guys. Do you still like guys? Yeah, I'm gay, and so I like men. So I don't know what else I can say about that. But yes, I am still as gay as I have ever been. Let's see, what else here? Ed Infante says, favorite Nintendo game / franchise. I feel like I've returned to this theme a couple of times in this video, but my favorite Nintendo game is Super Mario World, and my favorite franchise is Mario. Mario is the first thing that I learned about when I learned about video games as a kid, and it is still probably like my favorite franchise of anything. Here's one of my many Mario figurines. It was very influential to me when I was a child. Like, it was the pop culture thing that I was most obsessed with. Mario, the style of Mario and the style of Mario still influences how I draw to this day. A lot of my inspiration came from the style of Mario graphics. And yeah, I mean, I think that I will always have a spot in my heart for Mario and the Mario universe, just because it was very formative to me. And I also think that there's like a sort of charm and creativity and innocence in the Mario world that I've never seen replicated by anything quite in the same way. James Tilsley says, "What? Thank you for the super chat, my friend, for your £1.99. What is the best and worst things about England?" Well, there's a lot of great things about England. I think there's a lot of aspects of English culture that are really compelling and really interesting. I'm working on a video about British culture that I am excited to get done at some point. I mean, and obviously British history is so rich, right? I mean, I remember when I was in London, there's so many museums to see. And you go into these museums that are these huge sprawling places, and there's just like so many artifacts and so many exhibits. And even when you're just walking in the streets of London, you can't walk for like 5 feet if there's like some plaque or some statue of some enormously important historic thing that happened there. And being in a sort of like historically important city like London is very powerful, I think, and very compelling, in the same way that being in New York was similar. You know, London is one of the most important cities in the history of the world, and I think you cannot be there and not experience what that means. The worst things about England is, I would say that there is like a real nastiness to British culture that I think is really quite intense. And I think it has only become more intense as the years have gone on. Like, where it just seems like that there is like a cruelty to a lot of British people in terms of like politics and argument and sort of fighting, and like the contempt that British people have for other British people can be so fiery and so red hot that I just find it like, you know, like just really off-putting at some level. I think that, like, for example, like British people, like the British far left, for instance, is like just full of a kind of bile, you know, not to be too visceral about this, but like just like some of like, say, like the real hardcore Corbyn people, like their politics is just so extreme and so like vicious and angry. And I mean, like the same is true on the British right as well. You know, like some of these, like, what is it, like British Defence League and all these, like, and some of like, you know, like the Nigel Farage set and that kind of crew, like their contempt for other British people is just so extreme as well, that I find that like Britain is a nation of a lot of I think extreme polarization that even makes the polarization in America, which is sort of always held up as sort of the gold standard of polarization, look like nothing. So that's definitely not something about Britain that I have ever really liked. Jeremy says, thank you for the super chat, Jeremy. The Brazilian flag has text on it, defend. Well, I don't think that there is anything automatically wrong with a flag that has text on it. I think it depends how the country deals with it, you know? I think that the Brazilians have a nice flag despite the fact that it has text on it. Not because it has text on it, but I think that if a flag is going to have text on it, you should manage it in a competent way, and I think the Brazilians have. So I got no problem with the text. Nathaniel Thrush says, worst city in Canada, be as obscure as you like. That's a good question. The worst city in Canada. Man. I don't want to give I want to try to think of like a really obscure city, but I also don't want to be too mean-spirited, because like I've never been to a part of Canada that is just like completely without redeeming qualities. Okay, here's an answer. Sort of north of Coquitlam, there is an unincorporated zone, and it has like a big gravel quarry and almost nothing else, and just a big dead end. That was a city I did not particularly care for. It didn't have a lot of redeeming qualities. Can I cite an unincorporated zone? Like it's called something like District A or something. And yeah, didn't care much for that. Brett M, thank you for the super chat, my friend. Oh, 2 set rules. I'm glad you know what it is, Brett. I don't like talking about the way that I talk. I find that to be not a good subject of conversation. I talk the way that I talk because of who I am and sort of the influences that have impacted me throughout the years. So Rowan, people make fun of the way I talk, and that's honestly something I'm a little bit insecure about. Like I had a lot of teasing when I was a kid, based on how I talk and how I pronounce some things. So I'm a little bit sensitive to that. So I don't really want to talk about that. Rowan says, JJ, will you ever read the entire B movie script? Is this something that people do? Is this like a YouTube thing, reading the entire B movie script? Maybe if I'm ever doing a charity fundraiser, I would think about doing something like that. Lou Bravo says, thank you for the super chat, my friend, my old friend, Lou. Would you ever wear a Canadian Mountie uniform in any of your future videos and make an in-depth video about the history of the Mounties? Sure, I'd make a video about the history of the Mounties. I think people would go for that. Wearing a Mountie suit, I don't know about that, though. I feel like that, I don't want to. I'm always dressing up for the videos. I'm not a big dress-up guy. I'm not knowing better. I'm not a costume sort of type of person. I feel like, I don't know, I feel very self-conscious when I'm wearing sort of silly outfits. Except on Halloween. I like Halloween. Alyssa Parent says, is your old blog still up? No, it's not. In fact, a lot of the content from that era is kind of gone forever. I probably still have some of it archived somewhere, but a lot of the writing is probably not very good either. It's, I've often thought about, like, I guess I'm getting pretty old now, but as I get older, I've often thought it would be fun to like release a book that's kind of like a collection of like JJ's writing over the years, like a JJ sort of reader, and sort of reflect on some of the different writing about current events that I've done, as I've sort of covered a relatively broad swatch of the last couple of decades. We're getting near the end of the chat, my friends. It's been almost 2 hours. I need to get some dinner. Oh, I skipped over your super chat. I'm very sorry, my friend. I'm doing my best to keep on tabs of all of the super chats, but there's so many of them that sometimes they get lost in the shuffle, and I honestly feel bad whenever that happens. So I'm very apologetic. If you want to send me an email asking the same question, I'd be happy to give you a response that way. Swamanthian says, I may be moving to Canada from the USA in the next 6 to 8 months. What to expect and how to cope? Is home ownership in Toronto and Vancouver impossible? I would suspect yes. I don't want to overgeneralize, but unless you're a very wealthy person, you'll probably not be able to own your own home. And you'll probably pay a lot in rent. Vancouver in particular is extraordinarily expensive as far as rent goes. Toronto is very expensive as well. What kind of things you will expect and how to cope? I don't think that you're going to experience much culture shock, no matter where you're coming from America, unless you're like coming from, I don't know, like Alabama or something. Like, I'm sure you'll see way more similarities than differences, because Canada and the US sort of exist on a cultural continuity spectrum that has very minimal distinction. But one thing that you'll have to be prepared for is, like, you will have to sort of reset many aspects of your life. Like, you'll have to get a Canadian bank. bank account. You'll have to get a new driver's license. You have to get insurance and all of these. You'll have to deal with the medical system. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff in which you'll just kind of have things that you take for granted living in America. You're going to have to like hit the reset button and start fresh in Canada. And that's something that I think Americans sometimes underestimate when they come up here. What else do we have here? Charles Summers says, thoughts on Jewish American culture? It's good. When I was in Israel, that was sort of the first time, there's not a lot of Jewish people that live in Vancouver and British Columbia. So I didn't really grow up around a lot of Jewish people or Jewish culture. So it is something that I'm not super familiar with, in the same way I'm not very familiar with African American culture. These are kind of like the two big cultural blind spots I feel I have in my life. When I was in Israel, that was the first time I sort of really connected with Jewish culture. And since then, I've sort of made some Jewish friends, and I have a little bit more of a window into that. But no, definitely like Jewish American culture is something I'd like to learn a lot more about, and I'd like to be more exposed to it. So almost at the end here. Nathaniel Thrush says, favorite American region, love your content, been watching for years. Well, thank you, Nathaniel, and thank you for all of your super chats tonight. I really appreciate them. My favorite American region is probably the Pacific Northwest, if we can include California. My favorite American region is probably just the West in general. Like, I like Washington, Oregon, California. That's sort of like that's my jam. I want to live there if I could. But, that's also an opinion that is based on relatively sheltered perspective. I haven't spent as much time in the South as I would like. I really like the American Midwest, though. I must say, like, the Midwest is probably number 2 as far as places I like in America go. But I haven't spent as much time in the East, I'd like to spend more time in kind of like the New England region. I've only been to New York. I spent a little bit of time in Pennsylvania. I spent a little bit of time in Massachusetts. But, I'd like to see more of that area. Nicholas Morales says, now that you did Canada, what's the worst city in the US? Geez Louise. Worst city in the US? I haven't been to that many bad cities in the US, but I also haven't been to that many small cities in the US. I don't know. I don't want to say what's a bad city. I mean, wasn't super impressed with Newark. But then again, all I saw in Newark was like a train station, so I don't know. Is there any bad place I've been in America? No, I've not, it's hard to say the worst of something. Charles Rose says, do you think liberal politicians will use the economic lockdown and stimulus as a cover for long-lasting social programs? Thank you for the super chat, Charles. Do I think that liberal politicians will use the economic lockdown and stimulus as a cover for long-lasting social programs? I don't know. I don't really think that we live in a political culture where that sort of thing happens anymore. Like, I think that large-scale social programs are hard to do at the best of times. I think we saw that with Obamacare. Like, that was a significant but mild reform to the American healthcare system. And even that took so much effort and was such a long, drawn-out process. So the idea that any politician is going to be able to sort of covertly slip in some massive new social program, I just don't really think that that's the nature of how significant political programs are made in today's days and age. I think they're going to slip in a lot of spending. I think there's going to be enormous sort of spending. I think there already has been enormous spending, and a lot of it kind of very opportunistic spending. But in terms of an entrenched new social program that's going to last for a long time, no, I don't think that's likely to happen. Okay, just going to do these last few super chats, and then we're going to be off for the night. Will you do a video about Republican movements around the world, as in movements whose main goal is to make their country a republic, says Alex Winter. Thank you for the super chat, Alex. That would be a cool subject for a video, but I'm not sure if there are that many of those movements left. I feel like most Republican movements have been successful, and that in the few remaining monarchies that exist, there isn't really a particularly pronounced Republican movement, because in most of the countries that are still monarchies in this world, the monarchy is a relatively sort of benign force. Most of the oppressive monarchies have been overthrown and replaced, and the ones that remain are mostly symbolic. And the ones where the monarchy is still oppressive, I think, tend to be much more sort of authoritarian countries that don't really permit much political dissent of one form or another. So an anti-monarchy group in those countries would be sort of like say an anti-monarchy group in Saudi Arabia would just be a sort of like broadly anti-government group in general, probably run by like Islamic extremists or something like that. But it's an interesting idea. I'll think about that. All right, my friends. My friend Chance says, when is your birthday? My birthday is July 17th, 1984. And last question is, I think, going to be this one here from my friend John. Thoughts on statehood for U.S. territories? I think, much like Quebec separatism, I think that is a decision for the residents of those states to make, and not for outsiders like me to make. I think that there's a lot of benefit that could come from being part of the US, but I think that there are more benefits than people often acknowledge about not being part of the US, being an associated territory that doesn't have to pay income tax in exchange for no voting political representation and no voting in American presidential elections. I mean, it's a trade-off that I think some people are willing to take. All right, my friends. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. These were good questions today. I had a lot of fun answering them. It was fun taking a little bit of a break from politics, even though there was some political political questions, despite my best efforts. But thank you guys for all of your fun questions, and thanks for all of the super chats, and apologies for the many people whose questions I wasn't able to get to. But I'll probably be here again next week, and hope you guys all enjoy the video that I'm posting on Saturday. It's another flag video, and I think you guys will like it a lot. So talk to you guys soon, and peace out. Stay safe.